Thanks for inviting me back. I always love to come. It's a great facility. I am the historian for Oakland County Parks. A lot of people say, we didn't know the parks had a historian. Because when you think of parks, what do you think about? Trails and trees and picnic tables. And about 10 years ago, thankfully, I helped Oakland County Parks realize that, wait a minute, we have some history in our parks. Parks are not born parks. Every one of our parks is born a farm. And before that, wait, there's Indigenous history. So my job, we have 15 parks currently. The latest one, Pontiac Oaks. My job is tracing the history of the land those parks are on and the people who have lived and interacted with the land from Indigenous times up to the present. So I do a lot currently in Indigenous history. My own research right now, separately but connected, is on the Underground Railroad in Oakland County, because I found some incredible connections to those parks up there. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about the idea of if only a house had a birth certificate, how much simpler it would be, because many of us live in a house and we want to know when was it built and who built it and who's lived in that house over time. So how do you find that out? But wait a minute, I told you I'm a historian for the park system. Let me think, why would I need to research a house? Let me give you an example. Let me take you to Groveland Oaks, right there in the northern part of Oakland County. Here's a house. Oh, you're looking at that house and you're thinking old, aren't you? There's something about those little windows up there that tell you we know it's old. What's the connection to our park? Well, here's the connection. Here's our park. And on this 1872 map, there's that house. But it's older than 1872. We date it probably in the late 1840s, 1850s. But here's the cool story. Right here in 1891, Bernard Lennon had that farm. Now it's part of our park. In fact, some of the campground is on his land. And he decided he had way more oak trees than he needed, like a lot of people in Oakland County. He wanted more farmland. So he sold his trees. Now, in 1890, who would want to buy 50 acres of oak trees? Grand Trunk Railroad, for railroad ties. Now, that was a lot of trees. That was about 3 months of harvesting. So what they did, they literally built a little sawmill, brought in a portable sawmill onto that land. And lumberjacks, yes, in Groveland Township, some lumberjacks came in, and now they had lumberjacks in a sawmill and no place to put the lumberjacks for sleeping quarters. So that little house was empty at the time, so they turned it into a boarding house, which I call a little logging camp, right there in northern Oakland County. Now that's a cool story, not just for Groveland, but for Oakland County in general. And that's why I had to research that particular house. Here's another one. This is on the actual parkland of Groveland now. This is a Stewart house. Stewart was a Civil War soldier. Built this house. I had to research this house. Here was the problem. It was gone. All right. When I realized the Stewart people had had a house there, seeing a dot on the 1872 map, I said, oh, I'll research that house. Well, how do you research a house that isn't there? You hope you find a photograph, and that will give you a clue about the age of the house. I'm going to come back to this house and show you how I helped date it. And again, there's the house right on parkland. All right, so I'm going to take you, I had to pick a house. And Dave said they wanted the history of the house one. I picked a house in Orion Oaks because it's a really cool example of how complicated house history can be. Here's the house, all right? And my colleague and I, and you'll meet him in a minute, he's in Philadelphia at a conference, so you won't really meet him. You will meet this part of him. This is him. He's an architect. Some of you, anybody know Ron Campbell? He's the preservation architect for Oakland County. He and I work together a lot on house research because it takes two different perspectives. He's an architect. He will look at that house and see foundation and windows, but as a historian, I will look for other things. I will look at census records, land records, and together we create a much more enriched picture of the history of a house. Now, because we've done this house before, I will do the architecture part today about architectural style, because I've learned from him along the way, and that I had to think like an architect somehow. I'm still working on him thinking like a historian, but we're making progress. Now, the architectural style. I've picked about 4 or 5 styles that are really helpful in Oakland County. Greek Revival. It'll begin around 1830 through 1860, and it'll be super prevalent. But what were the characteristics? One, what we call return gables or return cornice. That's where it comes down and it tucks in again. And then wide cornices and friezes. Look how wide those are. And also frieze band windows. The windows up at the top are actually in the frieze board. Now, cornice and frieze. Here's your cornice on a house. Here's the frieze, the board beneath it. And those are distinctive on Greek Revival. And then a low-pitched roof, a very low of a pitched roof. All of the roofs on a Greek Revival are going to have low pitches. Small divided window panes. This is one we call a 6/6. 6 panes over 6 panes. And why? Because we weren't good at making big pieces of glass. That's as simple as it was. And so we made small panes, but we needed light, so we put a bunch of small panes together. Now, if you have a Greek Revival and those aren't there, you're not looking at original windows. And then, of course, a fieldstone foundation. Always you're going to see fieldstone. Here's some Greek Revivals. You, however, have one of the best examples sitting right here. The Barton House. Classic Greek Revival. And if you go look at that again, go out there and look at the Barton House again and use that characteristics, and you're going to see them all within the Barton House. Now wait a minute, let's go back to this one. What are you seeing here? Oh, low pitch roof. Oh, I'm seeing a cornice return. This helps me say this house was probably built before 1860. It's a classic Greek Revival. So even though I no longer have the house, I have one single photo that helps me place it in time. And now say the Stewart family was probably here by 1860. And that helps create park history. Now now we're into a new architectural style. Some of you may be familiar with this if I show you this. That's the house used with Grant Wood's American Gothic. That's a classic, different style now. That's what we call Gothic Revival. It'll come in at the same time as Greek Revival, but it's going to have a lot of different stylistic things. For one thing, it's going to have a decorative gable. All right, you don't see that in Greek Revival. It's going to have peaked hooded window trim. Oh, let me give you a close-up. It's got a peak to it, and it's kind of fancy. We're going to see windows that are paired. Gothic Revival tends to have two windows, and notice, bigger glass. By 1840, we're able to make bigger chunks of glass. Not giant yet, but we don't need those little panes anymore. Bay windows were very popular on Gothic Revival. And then steep roofs, and roofs of different pitches. Notice that they're both steep, but one is even steeper than the other. And then what we call an interrupted eave. The eave is coming over and it stops. Why? Because there's a gable there. And that's distinctive on Gothic Revival. And then there's often a porch. Not a real big porch, but a porch, and it usually has some decorated columns on it. Here's some Gothic Revival. Now they look different, but if you look at the different features I just showed you, they all have some of those, but they'll play out in different ways. Oh, Italianate. I love Italianate. These were beautiful houses. We don't have as many Italianate in Oakland County, but we've got some good examples. This is in Pontiac. This is the Merrick Palmer house. If you go down the cross where Pontiac Central used to be, it's a classic Italianate. It's going to be they're very square houses, all right? Very square. One big chunk of a square. Many of them have a cupola on the top. If they don't, there's still a little flat on top of the roof Now, Ron Campbell, my architect buddy, has a theory. We're going to prove it one day. He thinks that sometimes when people built an Italianate, they didn't have enough money to build the cupola, or you sometimes hear it called the widow's walk. Because out east, the captain, the sailors' wives would go up there and watch for ships to come in. And then we just borrowed that style. And he thinks maybe they decided to put that flat part in case they ever wanted to add that cupola at the top. Then you're going to see elaborate window crowns. Now, wait a minute. We saw that in Gothic Revival. People like that. And so they'll do it again in Italianate. Large glass panes. These are much larger, you're going to see now, because it'll start at the same time as Gothic Revival. And then a low-pitch hip roof. What's a hip roof? There's a gable roof, Greek Revival. There's a hip roof. Just a different roof style. And then you're going to get a wide overhang, and it's going to have roof brackets. That, to me, is the most distinctive thing. You've got these large, ornate brackets under this big, wide overhang. And then not always, but you often see double doors, and they're fancy. All right? This one, for example, you can see tall double doors, and they're fancy. Here's some Italianate. Now, Second Empire. We don't have a lot of examples. This is in Lake Orient. You're going to see more about this house today. It'll start about 1855. It'll start in Paris, France, the style. And we're often grabbing stuff in Europe. We're still where we like that, we're going to take that over here. It'll run till about 1890. The big characteristic right there, a mansard roof, all right? Well, what does that mean? You can see it's distinctive. There's a mansard roof. And here's how it came about. Louis Mansard was an architect in Paris. And in Paris, just ahead of this time, people were taxed on everything beneath their roof line. That's how they determined how much tax you owed. So Louis Mansard said, we'll just put some rooms in the roof. And those won't be taxed because they're not below the roof. They're in the roof. And that was get caught on. People save tax money by having a mansard roof. And then we just like the style of it. What else do you have? A molded cornice. So the cornice at the top is molded. It's not just plain like a frieze board. You're going to get brackets. Often they're not as long as Italianate. But again, people said, you know, we like those brackets. Let's put it in a new style. Bay windows. Wait a minute, we saw that on Gothic Revival. Why? Now, people like bay windows. So now they're incorporated in Second Empire. Here's some Second Empire houses. Some smaller than others, but it's a really classic style. Oh, Queen Anne. I lived in Pontiac's historic district. I've lived in Pontiac pretty much all my life, but in 30 years of it, I lived in a Queen Anne over on the Franklin Boulevard Historic District. I love my Queen Anne. It was not painted like this, all right? It was plain white, because when you paint like this, it's big bucks. But mine was a classic Queen Anne. What are the characteristics? Different kinds of siding. Now we get, if you look at the siding up at the top and here, you're going to see different styles in siding. You're going to see a turret often. My turret was enclosed and with a bay window. This is an open turret. You're going to see lots of porches. Sometimes even like here on the second floor. Or you're going to see a big wraparound porch. Queen Anne loved porches. You're going to see turned columns, and they're going to be fancy. Why? Because by now, the power lathe has been invented, and we don't have to carve things by hand anymore. So fancy columns are big. And lots of gingerbread. Same reason, the lathe. The lathe now, which could be water-powered or even foot-powered initially, could create gingerbread. And then a Queen Anne window. It's distinctive. It has one big frame at the bottom and a smaller one at the top. That's distinctive Queen Anne. Here's some Queen Annes. And look at the one on the right. Not super fancy, but that's still a Queen Anne, all right? Down to the one like you saw that was quite ornate. So now the test. Here's your exam. Here's a house. This is in Auburn Heights, right on Auburn Road. Wow, what is it? Oh my gosh, just look at it for a minute. Well, let's see. I'm seeing a steep pitched roof. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, I'm seeing a steep pitched roof, which says, can't be Greek Revival. Oh, wait, well, not Italianate, it's not a great big square. Gothic Revival, steep roof. Paired windows. Oh, wait a minute, paired windows, Gothic Revival. Heavy window hoods. Oh yeah, heavy window hoods. That was Gothic Revival. Decorative gable. Oh yeah, we saw that in Gothic Revival. Different kinds of shingle styles. That one's called a fishtail. Wait a minute, where'd that come from? That was Queen Anne. What's wrong with this? Wait a minute, you were going Gothic Revival and now you're Queen Anne, and wait, you have a porch, and there's a porch in the back. That's Queen Anne stuff. What does this tell us? This is what is called a transition house. It's during the time period where Gothic Revival's still around, but we're moving into Queen Anne, and the architect blends them together. Those are the houses that are tricky, because now we're talking about a wider time span. This is a house we just finished doing the history on. It ended up being 1887. Late for Gothic Revival, but right in the time when we're moving into Queen Anne. Now, you don't need an architect with you. I mean, I'm not going to push Ron aside for these books, but there are wonderful books online for looking about style. If you're thinking about your own house, and these will go up into the prairie style and art and the craftsman style, and they help you to look at different styles. All of these are on Amazon. They're all good. Just Google for house style and then narrow it down to American style. There's even one on Midwest, but it's all on balloon construction, so it's kind of a narrow thing. So now we know with the characteristics here, this is the house in Lake Orion we were working on. Well, you got a steep pitched roof there. And then as we began to look at it, Ron could see the interrupted eave, large panes of glass. Whoa, it just was screaming at us, I'm Greek Revival. All right, oh, we just said that. You'll see it wasn't quite so easy. So we decided it's Gothic Revival. So we placed it between 1840 and 1880. Big time span, but that's where we started. And then it got complicated, because then we began to go behind the house. And then notice, there seems to be a chunk in the back that doesn't fit, that doesn't belong. So we began to think about, is this the original house? And is that an addition? And if so, how old is it? So now our little plan about we'll be done on tomorrow morning with this house, 3 months later, it got a little complicated. Now look at the back of it. And this one. Now, what are we seeing? We've got a low-pitched roof, but that's not Greek Revival. There's no way. We've got different styles of windows from the front, and they kind of look pretty darn new. There's siding on it. There's a simple, very simple trim, nothing fancy here. And it has a concrete foundation. Okay, this doesn't belong with that piece of the front house. So we decided, with the architectural style, we better go inside and think about construction features. First, we began to think about what are we going to look for? Well, for one thing, we looked to see if there's a typical floor plan for a style of house. And there is for Gothic Revival. There's also one for Italianate. It doesn't work so well for Greek Revival. But it tells us these are the rooms you're likely to find. Well, in that house, it didn't quite fit, which tells us somebody either took out a wall or maybe added in a wall. So one thing you want to think about as you look at your house is there something added or removed? And we kind of had a feeling in this one. And then construction clues. Well, obviously, the older the house is, the stone foundation. That will change in 1900 when these magic machines will appear in the Sears Roebuck catalog. And these are block makers. These are now for making concrete blocks. Initially, farmers will buy these themselves and make their own block. Ron has a great story. He has a friend who has a farm and grew up on a farm in northern Oakland County. It was his grandfather's farm. And it has a concrete block foundation, and the blocks are falling apart. And they're cool blocks. You'll see what they are in a minute. And so the friend called Ron and said, what am I going to do? I can't find these particular blocks anywhere. They're like 1900. So Ron said, tell me about your grandfather. And he said, he kept everything. So he said, let's go look in the barn. And there in the barn was one of these. He had made, and now he was able to make his own blocks for his house because of that. Now, what will the first blocks look like? Rock face block. Why? Why weren't they smooth? Because people like stone foundations. That's what they were used to. They grew up in houses with stone foundations and said, you know, we like this concrete idea, but we kind of want to look at bumpy like the stone we're used to. And then we'll give that up and we'll go to these beautiful, boring cinder blocks. What are they made with? Cinder is left over when you burn coal. And we had a whole bunch of that. Between our houses and our factories, we were able to make cinder block. And then it'll go to a stronger, more durable block, concrete blocks. Still pretty boring. And so then, in the 1950s, we'll go to pattern block. They just were cooler. They were more fancy. And then, of course, foundation-wise, we'll go to poured foundation. So even if your foundation is concrete block, it depends on the kind of block you had to place it in time. And then, what's on the outside? Clapboard wood has been used since the 1700s all the way down through time. But board and batten won't come in until the 1830s, and it'll be kind of gone by 1900s. It's the vertical stuff. And then those beautiful wood shingles. There's an example of fishtail shingles that is so popular with the Queen Anne. And then pressed asphalt. Oh, wasn't that attractive? That won't last a long time. It'll be replaced by asbestos, which of course caused even more problems. And then we'll get siding. Aluminum first and then vinyl. So looking at what the house is made of. Now keep in mind, we had a house at Independence Oaks that had vinyl siding on it at 1970s. Now when you peeked under that, because it partly came off, there was clapboard wood. They had just covered it with siding. So you do have to be careful about that. And then what's in the walls? Pre-1900 horsehair in lots of houses. And it doesn't just, you have to really look. Horsehair is thin, so you have to even sometimes with a magnifying glass. But if it's horsehair, it was done before 1900, because then we'll go to wood lath. And wood lath is what's on inside your wall. You have plaster on the outside, and then the lath has little openings to push the plaster through for solidity. And then metal lath starts in 1900 and will go up to the 1950s, and that'll be in the plaster. And then we'll go to lovely drywall. All right, drywall, that lovely thing, if you've ever had to repair that, what fun that is. We'll go to drywall. And then, if you're lucky, if you have a really old house, you could have a hand-hewn beam somewhere. Sometimes they're in the floor. I've seen them in the ceiling. Sometimes they've been covered over time. What that tells you is they were made by hand and probably before a mill came into the area. So those hand-hewn beams are important. But they're not always true, because we have a house in Springfield Village, with hand-hewn beams. But they were taken when the guy knocked down his barn that was 1830s and put it in his 1950s house. So it doesn't always work, but I'm going to give you an example where it did work. Now, once you have a mill there, you'll begin to see the difference with the wood, the framing wood that comes in. This is a circular saw, because you can still see the lines of the circular saw in it. And then the floorboards. If you go in the basement, Ron always goes in the basement and in the attic. Those are the keys. The floorboards in the basement, up through the 1800s, they're going to be, a perpendicular to the joist. But then we'll change between 1900 and 1950s. The floorboards will be at an angle. All right. The house I grew up in, Pontiac, 1920. That my son's renovating it now and said to me, yeah, you were right about that. Well, that's nice to have you were right about that. They were there. And the house is 1920. And then 1950 to 1980s, we're going to see plywood as the subfloor. All right, the boards are gone. And then 1980s to the present, particle board. So looking at what the flooring is a clue. And then something like this is a pretty good clue. What is it? Coal chute. It's a coal chute. They were there on the outside, and lots of us just kept them. Or like my house, somebody replaced it with a window. All right, this one window sitting by itself. And then if you go into the basement, you still got coal dust along the wall there. Oh, a milk chute. Exactly. Particularly in the city, you had milk chutes. So looking at those pieces of history, even hinges. Now here, the big clue is not the hinge, it's the screws. Because a Phillips screw isn't invented till the 1930s. And it's not used very often till later, till we have power tools. So looking at as simple as a screw. And it's not one puzzle piece. Let me tell you, you're going to see in a minute. It's multiple pieces to put the picture together. So with a house, we look at the foundation, we look at all these different pieces. So now we had this house. Now we had to think about what our puzzle pieces were. We were pretty sure these two didn't belong together. Underneath the original, what we think is original, is a stone foundation. Underneath that one is concrete foundation and concrete poured walls. And in here, old part, perpendicular floorboards. On this part, it's plywood. Here, our conclusion. It was an original house, early 1880s, and then addition 1980s, about 100 years apart. So now, Ron has his theory. That's what he sees. Now, I come in to try and find the historical evidence to put that together. I have to look at now, can we find proof that those dates will match? So what am I going to look at? I'm going to look at the land. I'm going to research the land, because the land and who owned the land over time will be a big clue. And more importantly, I'm going to look at the people. Who might have built the house? Who lived in that house? Because to me, a house is the people. I want to know who built it. I want to know who lived in there. So to me, it's land and people, and Ron is looking at foundation and glass, and together we get this big picture. So now we got construction clues. Now what the first thing I'm going to do is, what do people already say about this house? And believe me, they will have dates out there for your house. I was lucky. In Orion Township, they did a historic structures survey. And our house on 1000 Clarkston Road made the survey. There it was. Gothic revival. They agreed with us. Built 1868, and it's called the Letts House. Usually when it's the name in the house, that's the builder. So I said, you know what? Except for that 1868, we're pretty set on this house. Well, it didn't turn out that way, all right? But we had an opening date. Then I always go to a real estate. What do the realtor people say about the house? Built in 1900. Well, they're always wrong. About 65% of the houses in Oakland County, realtors say built in 1901. It's just when the tax assessment came in. And they're always wrong. It called it a colonial. They will call anything that looks old a colonial. Trust me on that one. That one, but it gave me an idea of somebody else looking at that house. And then I'll go here. I'll see what the Rural Property Inventory says. These were done by the WPA. It's the 1930s. We want to find jobs for people. So the government said, you know what we'd like to know about our farms? What kind of house are people living in? How big is it? How many stories? What are they growing in their fields? Do they have a barn or not? And so they sent people out to inventory farms. And Oakland County was part of that project. And if you have a rural inventory, now if you're in a town, you're probably not going to get one unless you're on the edge. But if you have a house, a rural house, you get one of these. It'll tell you the year somebody came to that farm. It was 1938. And it'll give you a picture of the house at that time in history. And it'll tell you the year it was built, 1880. Well, that matched with us. Now be wary of these, because we've hit a lot of wrong ones, but it gives us another date. So now we have 3 dates that we've located. Now here's what it said about the house in 1938. This part, a 2-story part to the house. Well, that matched. And then it said, over here, there was a 1-story part. What's the problem? Oh, that's 2-story. But wait a minute. It said in 1938, there was a 1-story chunk added on to the front. But when did we think the addition went in? 1980s. Why should it even be sitting there? That was a problem. And then it had another little chunk back here. So clearly what we were seeing wasn't matching 1938. And then the second page will give you a picture of the farm fields. That's cool. What were the different fields? Was there a woodlot? Was there a pond? Where was there wheat growing? And then we noticed something on this one. It said the house was on Clayton Road. Well, that's Clarkston Road now. What does that tell us? That road has gained a name. And immediately I'm going to be looking for what farm? The Clayton Farm, because that's probably the name at that time. And over here it'll tell you about the outbuildings. This says that in 1938 that house had a general barn, a cow barn, and a lean-to. And they were built in 1860. Wait a minute, that's a problem. Why would you build your outbuildings, including a cow barn, before you have a house? If you build your house in 1880, how did your barns get built in 1860? That told us there's another puzzle piece here. Why were the barn buildings so much older than the house? What does that tell us? There could have been an older house there before that. So you see, what seemed like a simple house was turning into a complicated house. So now I said, let's see if we can find old photos. And we were fortunate. The current owners had inherited photos, including this one. Oh, a barn. Cool old barn. I bet that's the barn that was there in 1938. Now, is that an old barn? Well, a roof is the key to a barn. That's a gable roof. They're the old barns. That's a gambrel roof. The way we think of a barn, that's a newer barn. So the gable roof, the simple roof, is going to be older. Oh, whoa, this picture they pulled out. Wait a minute. What is this? What's the style? Greek Revival. Look at that. Look at the cornice. What is this? And they said, no, this is our house. This chunk in back. And I said, it's not back there. This big, but this must have been there at one time. Wait a minute, look at this. And look at this porch. Wait a minute, what had they done here? There had been original porch on this, and then they had enclosed it over time. And wait a minute, see that car? Let's go back here. Is that the same car? The car is where the porch is open, and now it's closed, which tells you these photos were showing when the porch was enclosed. And that's my message to you this morning for the historians of the future. Every time you add to your house or take something away, take a photo, because that's a record. If they hadn't had this photo, we would not have been able to solve the mystery. So when you do something, even if you take a wall out or a cupboard out, just photograph it and put it away, because that's the history of your house. And you're making history right now. I live now, instead of that beautiful Queen Anne and little tiny Cape Cod out in Ortonville. I moved there because I wanted a little land, and we've got deer, and I have a granddaughter, and I've got 3 acres now. I didn't have that in the city. So it's a big change for me. But it occurred to me, when we do something to the house, I got to record it. Because in 100 years, that little Cape Cod will look ancient to somebody. So record the changes. So now, look up here. There's an addition to that piece of it. This had been modified a lot. But that was a clue that that old chunk in the back, that was before 1860. Wait a minute. Then they gave us this photo. They located that and called us out and said, we found another photo. What's this? This is the demolition of that old part. It had to be, they said, the owner said they had to take it down, that it was in such poor shape they weren't able to save it. Now look what was underneath the flooring. These are hand-hewn beams. So that tells us that this was a very old house, all right? You've got some perfect examples of hand-hewn beams underneath that house and no basement on this part of it. And then the last one, this is when the new foundation, the new addition is coming in. So we had a timeline of this house. But now I needed to know who was doing these changes. So then we decided, wait a minute, before we move to the people, let's look at aerial photos. Maybe they'll tell us when these chunks were done. So here's the house right now, and then we go back in time. 2000, wait a minute, 274. Take a look at that. That's when before the foundation, before the addition is on, which matched us. We said 1980. This is 74, and the old chunk is still there. And that's when we can place that in time. And then, 1940 isn't very good. There's the house. Oh my goodness, isn't that clear? They're blurry, but look at here. That was the barn. That lets us know that in 1940, the barn that they said was there in 1938 was still there. Now, where do you get these? 2 places. The Oakland County Property Gateway. You can go in and find your house on a map where you can put in your address, and they will take you back from today back to 1940. Or you can go here and do the same thing. Picturing Oakland County through time. Some people say that's easier. I use the other one, but a lot of folks who are doing their own house tell me they like this one better, all right? You can just take your neighborhood back through time. And then you can just clip. You can clip the piece of it and grab the clip of what you have there, all right? It's amazing to look at your community change over time. Well, now we have to find location. Well, now wait, it's 1000 Clarkston Road. That's location. Not for land records. Land records in Michigan go differently. They go with where you are in a township. Even if you have a city house, my Pontiac house, I had this research by knowing where it was in Pontiac Township, not Mary Day Avenue, okay? So how do you do that? Well, first of all, how did we get townships? 1815, they begin to survey the territory of Michigan, and they divide it up into townships, the whole state. There's Orion Township. That's the one we're looking at. Here's the survey map of Orion Township. And then they took the township and they divided it up into sections. They're 1 mile by 1 mile. And every township has 36 of them, and they all have a number. Now, the only thing is if you're on the coastline, where the water is, you'll get a little difference. And then they took the sections and they divided them into quarter sections. So land records are based on the quarter section that you live in. So what do? I took a 1908 map of Orion Township because I knew the house was probably there by then. And I located the house, and I noticed it was in section 13. Then in section 13, there's the house. 1908 map will show houses. It won't show barns or anything, but it'll show houses. So now I took that, and then here's 13, and I realized it was in the northeast quarter. But then I said, I can get smaller. Here's the land, the 80 acres the house was in for long periods of time. That's the west half. So the narrower you can get, the easier it is to research land. Once I know that, I can trace the land ownership over time. I can go in to online to the clerk's office, and I can get, based on the quarter section, what we call an acreage report. You can go to the clerk's office and get it in a big book too. It's just that I find it easier online now, but you can go and say, here's my house, even your address, and they'll give you this, the acreage report. If you have the abstract for your house, you have this, all right? It's also called a tract index. And what it does, someone has taken every deed for your property, gone through them, and written down everybody who's owned that property, from the very first person who would have bought it from the federal government all the way down through time. So it's tracking ownership down through time. So when I pulled the one for this one, I learned that in 1834, Alfred Douchy bought the land from the federal government, but he couldn't afford all 80 acres. He only bought 40 of them. And he paid for that land $80, all right, $2 an acre. Oakland County was going for $2 an acre, and then the federal government said people aren't buying it. They dropped it to $1.25. Just imagine Oakland County now. But anyway, he buys 40. But then, by 1835, he buys the other half for $80, so now he owns all 80 acres. And that 80-acre parcel stays 80 acres for a very long time. Well, now here's my problem, though. Did he live on the land? People were buying land in Oakland County and never coming here. The governor of Massachusetts owned land in Rose Township, okay? Why did he buy? Speculators. Henry Schoolcraft owned land in Rose Township. But they were speculating. They never came here. So all I have to say was, yeah, okay, he owned the land, but did he live on the land I'm researching? How would I find out? Now I got to go to census records and see if he's there. I got to go to 1840. That'll be the closest census. So now I go to 1840 census in Orion, and sure enough, he's there with 2 children, a boy and a girl, both between 5 and 10, and there's his wife, 4 people in the family. So now I can say he was likely the first person to live on this land, okay? Where did I get the census? If you have a subscription to Ancestry, you have access. But Family Search is free, and that has census, loads of records, and that's absolutely free. And they're both searchable. So I always say, don't spend the bucks on Ancestry if you're just doing small, go to Family Search. It's very, very friendly. All kinds of guides for how to use it. Well, now I said, okay, so now I've got a clue, but this map isn't going to help me. I need an older map. This is the oldest map you'll find of the township you live in. We have them all. This is 1838. After the survey map, this is the earliest. Not a lot of information here. Where am I getting all these maps? I'm not buying them online. I'm going to the Oakland History Center website. They're all there, starting with the survey maps all the way until 1908, and 1921 is going up soon. They're all there. So here's 1938. Let me make it big. Here is Mr. Douchy's farm. Okay, he was there in 1938. His name's not on it. I just know that that's the land. But here's what I always ask. Why did he buy that piece of land? You know, the biggest question of history is not who, what, why. Who, what, when, where, it's why. I'm always fascinated. Oakland County had all kinds of land then. What draws someone there? Well, I have a theory. Let me show you the land. Right across the street, that on the corner, was the Paint Creek. Did farmers need a creek? You betcha. They were looking for water nearby. Also, Carpenter's Mill. Wait a minute, if I'm going to take a piece of land, what's the advantage of having a mill across the street? I can get frame boards for a house. And so he's right there. And then what else are you looking for? You're looking for a road. We didn't have a lot of roads in Oakland County, but he knew that the mill had a road going to it. Mills had to have a road coming in to get the lumber out. So he had water and a mill and a road. And my guess is that's why he came there. And that's an important part of why does people take a piece of land. Now here's what happened in Oakland County, right in this spot and a bunch of other places. Davisburg, Waterford, Pontiac, they all did this. They got a sawmill. And then people came because there was a sawmill. And then they built a grist mill because people were farming and needed a place to grind their grain. And then a community will grow around it. It's repeated all over Oakland County. And people who came here like Douchy were thinking about that. And sure enough, it did. It grew into a little town called Rudd's Mill. And it was there for quite a while. It's quite a historic site. You'll learn more about it in a minute. Well, now, what happened after Mr. Douchy? Well, according to the acreage, Nancy Douchy sold the land to Edward Crosby in 1849. All right, about some 15 years later. Wait a minute, who's Nancy? Well, I'll bet that's his wife. Well, now what happened to Alfred? What are our possibilities? He left. He left his family. I thought, oh, did he leave? Did Alfred leave them? You know, historians are thinking, Alfred, did you leave that family behind? How can I prove what happened to him? I went looking for a probate. My guess was no, I have trust in Alfred. He stayed. But he passed away. So now I'm going to go to probate records and see if Nancy had inherited the land. And on Ancestry, there are probate records. Now, if you don't have a subscription, you can go to your library. Most of them have that. And find a probate record. And sure enough, Alfred Douchy had a last will and testament in which he left everything to my dearly beloved wife, Nancy Douchy. And that's why she had the land. But now I needed to know how much. I knew the 160 because I knew what land was selling for Oakland County. How would I know how much she got for the land? Now I need to go to a deed book. I can go out to the clerk's office, but it's time consuming, and it's on microfilm or microfiche, which I'm not real fond of, in a dark room in the basement going like this for hours and hours, but a lot are online now. But how do you find them? Magic numbers on your acreage report. That's the volume or the book number your deed is in, and that is the page number. Once I have that, I can go to familysearch.org, where the deed records are located, and I can look for that volume, go to that page online, and I can find the deed, in which it said she got $850 for the land. And now I began to think, had Alfred Douchy built that old Greek Revival house? It was in the right time period, okay? It, remember, has those beams in the bottom of it. He could have, because notice, that's a nice big increase for land in there. That tells me there was a house on it. But wait a minute, was it that house or was it a log cabin? Well, here's what I did next. I went to the tax records. They're online between 1834 and 1840. And if you're looking for, you can Google for that, or take my card and I can send you the link for this also. And I looked at Orion, and here's what I found. Alfred Douchy, for his 80 acres of land, paid about $4 in taxes that year, 1840, okay? Now that's the equivalent of about 143. That makes me cry. Doesn't that make you cry? You go, oh my gosh, 140 feet out for 80 acres of land. Oh my goodness. But here's what I had to look at. Does that mean what his house looked like? Well, here were other people who owned 80 acres. Look at their taxes. What does that tell me? His house was substantial, because I'm betting those other people were all living in a log cabin. And why did he have a frame house? He was living across from the sawmill. Now wait a minute, if he had a sawmill, why did his basement, the foundation under the floor, have hand-hewn beams? I have another theory, all these unproven theories, but they make sense. What would he have been living in before he built that house? A log cabin. So now he goes to build his house, and he's got these beautiful, strong logs. He takes them and he puts them in his floor. Because you got them, and they're hand-hewn, no one's going to see them. So now he's on his second house. And it really, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So now, could he have built the Greek Revival, the Gothic? No. But that house behind there, there's a good chance. But we'll see if other people. Now what happens? Edward Crosby, his name gets misspelled like crazy. He will buy it. Let me go back here. He'll buy it. Okay, and he's the one who buys it from Nancy Douchy. And here he is. Here's his family. They're from England. He comes with 3 children from England, and he buys land there. And he buys it, logically, with a house already there. Here he is with Jane, his wife, and then 3 children. And now I got to go to the next map, because I'm moving forward in time. I can go to 1857 map now, and I can find that farm, and here it says, wait, Jane Crosby owns it. Wait a minute, how did Jane get the land? Well, maybe I'm seeing the same pattern here. So I assume something had happened to Edward Crosby by 1857. So I looked at the 1860 census, and there was Jane Crosby living with one of her children, the 13-year-old, the youngest child, and then she was living with Freeman Mary and James Barnes, who I didn't have a clue. Who were they? Why are they living in Jane's house? All right. But I said, all right, she's a widow now. She's taken, it would probably room in the house. She has a lot of people who had boarding people at that time period. But then what happened next? 1863, Freeman and Mary Barnes and Jane Riches sell the house to George Denning. Wait a minute. Freeman and Mary Barnes, do you remember that name? I didn't know who Jane Riches were, but I went back. Freeman and Mary Barnes were living with Jane Crosby. How did they get the land? Wait a minute. How did they get? And then I looked at them, and then I said, wait a minute. Freeman's wife, Mary, was born in England. Wait, let me go back in time. Remember 1850? Mary was one of the children, and she had married Freeman Barnes. And then she was living with her mom, with her husband and child. And then, when Edward passed away, the daughter and the mother inherited the land. And actually, the other 2 children do, but they give up their land to their sister. Now, Jane Riches, who the heck was she? Well, she remarried and became Jane Riches. And that's how the 3 of them were able to sell the land to George Denning. He paid $1,800 for it. And again, that would appear that that house was there. Now, George Denning, I had to find him now. I found him in New York, Wayne County, New York, as a tavern keeper. Now, why did he come to Orion Township? He was running a tavern. I have yet another theory. Here was Rudd's Mill by then. It had 3 houses, a blacksmith shop, a general store, a cooper shop, a grist mill. But what didn't it have? A tavern. It needed a tavern, I said. So my theory is George Denning came to run a tavern, because these people from New York had friends here who were writing home and saying, wow, Rudd's Mill is growing. Come out here and start a tavern. And that's probably what he did. Now, he'll only own it for 3 years. So it looks like that plan didn't work. And he'll send it to Jacob Saylor for $2,800. Now, Jacob Saylor, I had to find him. Here he is, the only photo I had, 1875. Wait a minute. He would have been probably in his 70s when he bought the land. Who was he? He was living in Warren County, New Jersey. All right? His wife had just died. And he decided to come from Warren County, New Jersey to Orion Township. Why would you do that? Because your son was already living there on a farm. You're in your 70s, you've lost your wife, and you go to live with your only living son. And that's why he comes here and decides he wants his own house, and he buys that house. 1868, Jacob Saylor will sell the house. Now I said, oh, he's passed away. No, I've lost another one. No, he moved to Texas. Why did he move to Texas? His son in Orion moved to Texas to try ranching, and he followed him down. He sells it for $3,200. But wait a minute. James Letts. I said, I'm back where I began. The Orion Survey of Houses said it was the Letts home. Maybe I've got another puzzle piece. So 1872, I go to that map, it's all online, and sure enough, J.M. Letts owned the farm at that time. Now I said, we're still not in the time for a Gothic revival, but he must have bought that house that I think Alfred Douchy built. I think that might be the clue, the house is coming soon. Because remember, they said 1868, but we didn't believe that. Now I said, I'm going to look for newspapers. Census is good, but I need stories. Newspapers have stories. Right here online. It's searchable, online, digital Michigan newspapers. Our papers go back to the 1830s. Pontiac Gazette, Pontiac Jacksonian, the Oxford Times. Loads of treasure trove. You can search for your uncle. You can search for your great-grandfather, for the town you're living in, or a town your family's connected to. Let me warn you, you get in there, you won't be out for hours, okay? It's addictive when you start searching here. But here's what I found. April 28th, 1880. The people out in the country are now determined not to be entirely outdone by the village folks of Lake Orion. Consequently, improvements of various descriptions are being made. The enterprising farmer, J.M. Letts, having moved the old house back, is preparing to erect a fine new dwelling in its place. Historians live for this kind of article. This was the whole magic. This said in 1880, there was the old house there, and what did he do? Bless his heart, he didn't knock it down. He moved it back and used it, incorporated it into his new house that he built, which was the Gothic revival. What a great clue there. What a great clue. So he did build that. And then that back section that would be there until the 1980s. And that made perfect sense now, a Greek revival house. And he decided it was a great house. Why move it? And now all those wonderful pieces that got later demolished. Now, I still think Alfred Douchy built the original house. The best clues are there. So now we have a pretty good picture. Now I could stop, but I don't. I never seemed able to stop. I had to go follow James Letts now. I found out that he sold in 1884. He would sell the land to Ralph Metcalf. Here was the deed. So he sold it for $6,000, which, why? He had that beautiful Gothic revival now. Now, I noticed then, 6,000, but I went and noticed on the other side of the page was another deed, and I just happened to look to the left. They're 2 pages often. That deed was from Ralph Metcalf to James Letts for $3,000. So Letts sells Metcalf his 80 acres in his house for $6,000, and Metcalf is selling him the same day something for $3,000. And what was that? Well, that was for village lots in Lake Orion. All right? Village lots 5 and 6 in Lake Orion. And then I said, I've got to find where they are. 1896 has a Lake Orion map. They were right here. He bought those. Those were prime village lots at that time. And then I realized that house is still there. That was the house we originally had picked to research and said, no, it'll be too hard in town. We'll do another farmhouse. And we ended up right back. We started with that Second Empire house we had looked at originally. And that James Letts had built in town. So those two houses were absolutely connected, that Second Empire one. So 7 pieces. 7 takes you the longest amount of time, but look at the resources. You know, 10 years ago, we couldn't do this. Now we have access. These records are online for us. And you don't need to be a historian. You just need to be a detective. And you need to have this passion. It's really detective work. My son calls me the Columbo of history. I taught at OU, and I said, your professor is the Columbo of history. And they look like, who's Columbo? See, you guys know. Oh, it's good when people know. And then you want to think about this. It's not just about one house. It really isn't. It's about the land, and it's about the people that lived in that land. And really, it's bigger than that. Because by researching that house, we learned more about Orion Township. That little Rudd's Mill, that nothing left but a foundation now of the mill along Clarkston Road. That helps us know more about Oakland County, because that little mill town is repeated all over Oakland County, which really helps us know about Michigan, because mill towns are all over Michigan. So we understand Michigan history. And then the best part, that's what American history is. It's the collection of all our little stories, our family stories and our community stories. That's the best part of American history. That's why local history is so important. So it's not just one little house. Thank you.